Picture this. You walk into a room thinking you're in control. You've prepared what you're going to say. You've rehearsed your logic. You've even practiced the calm voice you're going to use so you sound reasonable and not emotional. You're sure you're ready. But 10 minutes later, you're sitting there feeling exposed, off balance, and weirdly defensive, and the quiet person across from you. They haven't even raised their voice. They haven't threatened you. They haven't insulted you. They just told you exactly what you were going to say before you said it, pointed out the part you were hiding from yourself, and made it sound like the conclusion you're now agreeing to was your idea. That person is very often an INFJ. And this is why no one can defeat them. Today we're breaking down 6 brutal reasons why arguing with, manipulating, or trying to outplay a true INFJ almost never works. And before we get into it, let's clear something up. This is not about them being nice, sweet, sensitive, soft, or any of the usual cliches. Underestimate an INFJ because they're calm, and you are already losing. Their calm is not passivity. Their calm is control. Reason number 1. They don't react to what you're saying, they react to what you're doing underneath what you're saying. Most people argue at surface level. They take what you say and respond to it. You say, "I'm fine," they respond to, "I'm fine." You say, "This isn't about me," they respond to that. INFJs don't waste energy there, because they don't believe surface answers are real data. They're tracking micro-behavior. They're watching whether your breathing shifted when a certain topic came up. They're noting that your tone got a fraction tighter when they mentioned a specific name. They're registering that you brought up a logical argument to cover an emotional discomfort. They're watching the timeline of your reactions, not just the content of your words. Here's why that matters in conflict. You can defend what you said. You can't easily defend why you said it. When an INFJ says, "This isn't really about what happened yesterday, you're actually afraid I'm going to leave," they've pulled the floor out from under you. The whole argument you prepared, the texts, the examples, the charged statements, the bait, gone. Because they went straight to the driver behind your behavior. And once someone names your real motive out loud, you either have to be radically honest or you have to lie in a way that makes you look dishonest. Either way, they've cornered you without ever having to win the argument in a traditional way. And it's not mystical. This is learned. INFJs spend years, usually starting very young, watching people say one thing while clearly meaning something else. After a while, the gap between stated intention and true intention is obvious to them. They walk into every interaction scanning that gap like radar. So while everyone else is arguing the words, the INFJ is already inside the motive. You can't really beat someone who refuses to fight on the level you're attacking. Reason number 2. They're already playing further down the timeline than you are. Most people in conflict are reacting in real time. You said something, they felt something, now they respond. The INFJ experience is different. While you're in right now, they're in where this is going if I let it. They almost never look at a situation as this moment only. They look at trajectories. If I tolerate this behavior, what does it become in 6 months? If I agree to this demand, what expectation will that create in the future? If I reveal this personal information, how will it be used later? This is devastating in negotiation. You might think you're trying to resolve today's disagreement. The INFJ is deciding whether you're someone who can exist in their long-term reality. You're arguing about a specific boundary in a specific situation. They're asking themselves, if I give ground here, am I training this person to push me again? That means they are not desperate for this interaction to end smoothly. They're not bargaining for peace today. They're managing the next 12 chapters. And when someone is thinking in long arcs while you're thinking in short bursts, you cannot trap them. You can't intimidate them with urgency. You can't force them into impulsive choices. You can't get them panicked with, "We have to fix this right now," because they've already mentally prepared for what happens if you walk. Quietly, they've run through separation. Quietly, they've gamed out distance. Quietly, they've mapped the version of their life where you're not in it. So you can threaten loss. They've already survived that loss in their head. That removes your leverage. Reason number 3. Their values are not negotiable because those values are load-bearing. Here's where people consistently misunderstand INFJs. Many people think values are opinions. This is what I prefer. No, for an INFJ, the real, core values are structural. They're the beams holding up the entire internal self. They're not what I like. They're what I cannot betray without becoming someone I don't recognize. So when an INFJ says, "I can't stay in something that feels dishonest," that's not a threat, it's a statement of physics. You're not going to persuade them with pressure, bragging, guilt, begging, status, money, attention, fear of being alone, or even love if love means abandoning integrity. This is why people call INFJs stubborn, unreasonable, or cold when they finally draw a line. It's not coldness. It's self-preservation. They know exactly what it costs them internally to bend certain principles, and they refuse to pay that cost, even if the social fallout is heavy. And here's the brutal part. They already tested that value privately long before you ever hit it publicly. By the time you're pushing them to compromise, they've already spent entire nights running that scenario through their head, challenging themselves, asking, "Am I overreacting? Am I being dramatic? Is this just ego?" If it survived that internal interrogation, you are not going to move it through casual debate. You're trying to knock down a wall that's already been reinforced from the inside. Reason number 4. They will end the connection before you realize it's ending. INFJs don't always fight back in obvious, dramatic ways. A lot of their power comes from controlled disengagement. Here's how that looks. On the outside, nothing explodes. There's no screaming match. There's no social media blast. There's no theatrical exit. But something crucial shifts: access. You don't get the same warmth. You don't get the same emotional availability. You don't get the same priority. You text and the reply still comes, but it's shorter. You see them and they're polite, but the intimacy is gone. You feel it. You can't prove it, but you feel it. What just happened is not mood, it's classification. You were quietly moved from inner circle, trusted, to monitored, limited. That single move is lethal because you can't really argue someone back into trusting you. Trust isn't an on-off switch for them. It's an allocation model. An INFJ invests based on conviction. Once the investment has been withdrawn, you're negotiating with a version of them that has already emotionally adjusted to life without you. That's why, to other people, INFJ boundaries feel like sudden abandonment. But from the INFJ side, it's not sudden at all. It's the final step of a long internal audit. And here's why this is unbeatable. Most power in relationships comes from the assumption you won't actually leave. People weaponize access because they assume you still need them. But INFJs are willing to walk. Not dramatically, not angrily, but cleanly. Once they hit that internal decision point, they don't argue, they don't chase, and they don't beg for you to understand what you did. They simply stop feeding the connection. You're left fighting for something they've already let die. You cannot beat someone who is capable of emotionally exiting while still looking physically present. Reason number 5. They can talk directly to the part of you that you keep hidden from everyone else. The scary thing about being in a real conflict with an INFJ isn't that they yell. It's that they don't have to. They can look at you and say one sentence that hits you harder than someone else's 45-minute rant. Why? Because they're not throwing generic accusations. They're speaking to the exact fault line inside you. Let's say you've been performing confidence but secretly running on insecurity. The INFJ won't say, "You're arrogant," that would bounce off. They'll say, very quietly, "You don't have to prove that you're worthy. I already know you are." And you'll feel exposed, because they just addressed the real engine behind your behavior, not the mask. Or if you're manipulating, they won't scream, "You're toxic." They'll say, "You're scared that if you don't control this, you'll lose it." Boom. There it is. Straight to the core fear. That does two things at once. 1. It disarms your defense systems. You can argue against accusations. You cannot easily argue against being seen. 2. It flips the power dynamic. You thought you were in control because you were emotionally louder, or more forceful, or more dramatic. But control doesn't come from volume. Control comes from accuracy. And the INFJ is precise. This is also why people describe INFJs as dangerous when pushed. They don't usually go for humiliation. They go for truth. But truth, when it's laser targeted, feels like being cut open. If they wanted to, they could absolutely break you down in front of yourself. The only reason they usually don't is because, ethically, they hate using that power to damage. But make no mistake, they know they can. Reason number 6. They are psychologically independent. This one is brutal because it quietly invalidates most methods people use to win control over others. Here's the pattern in a lot of power plays. If I pull back love, you'll panic and comply. If I make you feel guilty, you'll cave. If I embarrass you, you'll fold. If I get other people on my side, you'll submit. That works on people whose stability is externally sourced. It does not work on an INFJ who has already learned how to self-stabilize. INFJs are used to feeling misunderstood. They are used to being told they're too sensitive, too intense, too suspicious, too serious, reading too much into it. Over time, they either break, or they stop letting outside misunderstanding define them. That moment, the moment they stop needing external agreement to trust their own perception, is the moment they become very, very hard to move. Because now what can you actually take from them? Approval? They've lived without it. Popular opinion? They've been on the wrong side of that their whole life. Your version of the story? They've already analyzed that and filed it. An INFJ who has detached from external validation is operating from internal authority. They don't need you to say they're right in order to continue believing they're right. And you can't defeat someone who doesn't require your permission to hold their position. Now here's where it gets even more intense. Combine those 6 things. This is where people finally understand why INFJs are so hard to beat. They're reading intention, not words. They're thinking long-term, not short-term. They're anchored to internal values that you can't bribe or socially bully. They'll cut access instead of escalating drama. They can talk directly to the hidden layer of your psychology instead of wrestling with the fake layer. and they don't build their confidence out of your approval in the first place. That's not 6 separate shields. That's a closed system. Try to pressure them emotionally, and they'll analyze the motive and withdraw access. Try to trap them logically, and they'll jump 5 steps into the future and refuse the setup. Try to guilt them, and they'll go straight back to principle. Try to get everyone on your side, and they'll say, "I don't actually need a side, I'm good." You're fighting a mind that is predicting you, an ethics system that is anchored, and a self that is self-sustaining. This is why so many people describe conflict with an INFJ the same way. I couldn't get through, I couldn't shake them, I couldn't make them break, I couldn't get them to play dirty back, and then they were just gone. You are dealing with someone who will give you patience, gentleness, benefit of the doubt, space to correct yourself, multiple chances to act in good faith, and then, once they decide you won't, they will calmly choose self-respect over continued access to you. That's not ego. That's discipline. Now if you're an INFJ listening to this, 2 things. First, no, you're not crazy. You're not too intense. You're not dramatic for caring. You're picking up signals other people ignore, and you're doing long-term math other people don't do. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition, future modeling, value alignment, and self-protection acting together. Second, this level of power comes with responsibility. Because yes, you could absolutely psychologically level people if you wanted. You could make someone cry in 2 sentences. You could emotionally starve someone by shutting them out. You could destroy someone's credibility quietly just by telling the truth about what you've seen. You already know this. The challenge is using that power like a surgeon, not a blunt weapon. The goal isn't domination. The goal is integrity. If you're someone dealing with an INFJ, someone you love, someone you work with, someone you're in conflict with, here's the actual path forward. Stop performing. Stop spinning. Stop pretending your motives are pure when they're not. You will not outact them. They already see it. Just be honest. Even if that honesty is ugly. Yes, I got defensive because I felt inferior. Yes, I tried to control the situation because I was scared. Yes, I wanted you to feel guilty so I wouldn't have to apologize. You think that's going to get you judged, but weirdly, that's the stuff an INFJ can work with. Honesty, even messy honesty, creates traction. Performance kills the conversation instantly. Here's the final truth. The reason no one can defeat an INFJ is not because they're trying to be undefeatable. It's because their mind, their ethics, and their self-respect are integrated. There's no open door you can easily exploit. There's no obvious weakness you can hammer. They're not relying on your approval. They're not addicted to winning in the moment. They're not ruled by panic. They're not for sale. You can't conquer a person who doesn't need you to validate their reality, doesn't fear walking away, and doesn't fight on the superficial level you're attacking. That's the quiet, brutal truth about INFJs. You don't beat them. At best, you earn their respect and you stand beside them. And if you're lucky, you keep them. Because once they're gone, you'll feel the absence more than you ever understood the presence.